Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today I'm going to go over a technique that I use to speed paint my British Airborne. Using this method I was actually able to paint a whole platoon box, so 30 of the plastic soldiers from WWII games, in 3 days. Total time was probably maybe 15-16 hours, lockdown being what it is, but I figure if you were able to spread that out across a week of hobby time, a whole platoon of guys in that stretch of time is not a bad result at all. Now this is a little bit simpler. It's not 100% historically accurate, but I think it looks pretty good. There's one or two notes in the video as we go about alternative colors you could use, and at the end I will do a little parade of the photos of the rest of the platoon so that you can see what this effect looks like when applied across the whole army. I will list the paints in the description below, so without any further mucking around, let's get started. Now you may wonder why this section looks and sounds a little bit different to the rest. And the reason being is I unfortunately lost about 4 minutes of footage, and it was important bits like how to paint the camo. So what I've done is just try and assemble a new fella as close to the original as possible, and we're going to go through and fix them up again. So what I've got here, I've got some middle stone over the top of a, skeleton bone primer from Army Painter. Anything which has a little bit of warmth to it will be good here, so even something like Wraithbone from Citadel, because we are thinning our paint out just a little bit more than usual, because we want some of that sort of natural shading to show through. So I've just got here my middle stone, and any old brush will do. Go ahead and just start painting on all of your kit. Now when you come to near hands and what have you, don't worry too much if you do get some of this on the skin, but try and avoid it if you can, because it will make painting the skin that bit quicker. So just go around now and middle stone all of the smock. Now we're going to see the triumphant return of the Camouflage brush. And this is just a real cheap little brush with a flat head that I've picked up from, where was this from? This is from the stationery aisle in a local supermarket. The cheaper the better. It doesn't matter too much. You want them to be a little bit frayed at the end so that you get a random pattern when you take your model. And let's start down here. So for example, let's just splash on a little bit of green there. And what you want to do is go around your model now. Just pick a few areas where you want some of this green. And you're looking to just splatter it on and get that nice rough edge. When you're painting camouflage on miniatures of this scale, if you paint it 100% accurately, what's going to happen is it will work, for lack of a better term, and you'll actually make it quite difficult to see some of the details of the model when it's on the table. So I tend to find, this is a purely personal perspective, but I think just impressionist camo works a little better. Again, your mileage may vary, and I have done another video on how to paint Denison smocks if you do want to do them a bit more accurately. But all we need is this US dark green, and just a few splatches. There we go. Then once that's dried, using our same brush and some mahogany brown, we're going to go ahead and just splatter on. Oh, that might be a bit much. Just doing the same thing. You want to overlap some of these green areas a little bit with your brown color. And remember as well that you are going to have some of these with webbing covering them too. So feel free, make it up as you go along. If you do want some guidance, you can always look, there's plenty of Ospreys, online resources, and of course the box art if you happen to be doing these guys from the Warlord plastic kit. Now hopefully that makes things clear. What we'll do now is jump on back to the original miniature. So now we can get on to some of the other colours, and I've got beige red. We're going to do all of his skin. Now part of the trick in using that warm, light primer is going to be that this will cover very quickly. So probably one coat, just go ahead and blast his skin with this. Now with his skin finished, we'll move on, and I've got Russian uniform here, and we're going to do all of his webbing. This is not particularly difficult, so all of his webbing and any areas that are going to be a different color later, like his water bottle here, for example. Just flatten the whole thing because we're going to paint over some of those areas later. Again, we're looking at saving time. Remember that he has got his belt running around his waist there, so don't forget that. And away you go with the webbing. Now, something I should have done before the webbing was actually his trousers, and that's mostly because he's got these little gaiters down the bottom here. If I have to go back and fix those, not a problem. I'm going to use US Field Drab, and we're just going to cover over his trousers. Again, a little bit more water in your paint than you might be used to. And this normally takes just one pass. If there's any really patchy areas, you can come back and give it a second coat once this one's dry. Now moving on up, we're going to use reflective or retractive or refractive green. The actual name on this thing, I'm sure there's a translation error somewhere in it. I will list a number for the color in the description, but I've always heard it referred to as reflective green, which is a very peculiar name, honestly. But we're just going to go ahead and coat all of his helmet. Don't worry about the camo netting and what have you, because tricks are going to help us out later with that. So normally one quick pass, some watered down refractive green, and then leave that one to dry. Now while his helmet's drying, we can get some German camo beige, and I'm just going to paint in his ground sheet hanging out of his pack here. In reality, this would probably have been a green at this stage, but I'm just looking for something that will add a little bit of visual interest here so that it doesn't all blend together. And they would have had a beige ground sheet at some point, so historical accuracy absolutely out the window here, folks. Now before we put on all of the colors is when we're actually going to apply our dry brush. Now I've got here any old soft dry brush will do. And I've got a little bit of dark sand, and we're going to be so sparing with this. So prep up your brush in the normal way, and then the best place to start, I find, with this is just flick across the top of his helmet to get an idea of how much you're going to leave behind. And you see that's pretty ideal. So what I'm going to do now is lightly dry brush along all of the raised areas of detail as much as possible. You're going to get some chalkiness on his sleeves, for example, but don't worry about that. Along his trousers, his webbing, everything. So take your time and hold the faith, okay? This will look terrible going on. I'll be genuine with you here. I was not sure this was going to work. That's why I did a test piece on this guy first. So let's go around and come back and have a look what this looks like once it's finished. And whew. Now there we go. Doesn't that look, Now, like I said, this really relies on a bit of faith and, hold your nerve when you're applying it. You do want to put on maybe a little bit more than you might expect. What we can do now is do the areas that we want to touch up with a little extra color, which might not have looked good with this weird highlighting effect we're going for, and a couple of colors which would just be impractical. So if you've got a wet palette, or you just happen to have it still on your palette, a little bit of German camo beige for the straps in his helmet here, so there's little bits of netting. And at the same time, you can go ahead and paint in the strap on his rifle. Now, speaking of his rifle, I've got a little bit of beige brown, and we're going to paint that in. At the same time, if he's got his entrenching tool on his backpack there, on his webbing belt rather, you can go ahead and paint this in with beige brown too. Now when you paint the rifle, I'd suggest you're better off just covering the whole thing in brown. Might seem counterproductive because we are going to paint some of this black later, but it just means any areas that you might miss or any recesses that end up being missed with your black later, when we shade the miniature, you're not going to see them. So just blacken the whole rifle and away you go. And now with a little bit of flat earth, we're going to go ahead and paint in both his water bottle. I like this because it covers pretty well, generally speaking, and once again, it's one of those colors, if you happen to miss any corners, when you shade the rest of the model, it won't matter too much. Now at the same time, you might want to swap to a smaller brush, but paint in the straps on his helmet. I've seen conflicting things on what this would have been. Some say khaki, some say canvas. I paint it flat earth because it looks good. So, you know, whatever you think is going to work here, but I figure I've got one color out already, so let's go. Now we're coming into the home stretch. I've got here a little black, and I just want to give a shout out. This is an Instar Alpha color. I don't think I've mentioned them on the channel before, but I really like using them. Example being just the sheer coverage on these. Watch this. So this is one coat of black, straight out of the pot, no water, done. I really like these. It's kind of like if somebody answered the question, what would contrast be like if they were opaque? And I really like these. So just a quick shout out to that. I will link their store in the description too, because they've got a bunch of colors. And at the same time, while I'm doing the boots, I'm able to black in those little bits of the rifle. So away we go. Now that's all of our base coats done. It's time at last for a shade. And to nobody's great surprise, I've got here Agrax Earth Shade. I'd recommend that you can also use Army Painter Strong Tone quite happily. The only difference there is that I would suggest you want to thin it out with a little bit of the Quick Shade mixing medium, because Strong Tone is going to darken that down, I think, quite a bit more than you might like. But mixing it out and thinning it a little will give you a very good result. But whatever the case, since I'm using Agrax Earth Shade, let's just all over. I never get sick of this, eh? All over the whole model. You want to really work it in, make sure you're not missing anywhere, and then give it about probably half an hour to dry. Maybe a little less if you're lucky enough to have somewhere that's sunny at the moment. Now, I don't want to alarm anybody, but some kind of magic appears to have happened here. As you can see, that brings down all of the colors, ties together that dry brush quite a bit, and it sort of mutes, you know, some of the extreme chalkiness, especially along the edges of the sleeves there. Now, this was actually inspired going back and watching Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, and similar. How the Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg stuff always has that slightly desaturated look. I think they mentioned messing with the filters on the screens at some point. But I think it actually works quite well for miniatures too. That slight beige cast to everything, well, it works. So you can, from here, just go ahead and base them up, put them on the table. But I would suggest there is one last detail which you will really, I think, really helps sell the look. Now I've got here some Iron Warriors. This is one of the new Citadel base paints, and it's a very dark gunmetal sort of colour. Now any old gunmetal you like, you can use here. I really like Iron Warriors because it's got this kind of very subtle brown-blue tint to it, like really, really tiny amount of colour in there. So it's not just flat silver, but just a wee bit of this to help sell the look of the gun. And oh, that looks, ooh, ooh. Now if you did want to go ahead and highlight the skin, I would recommend something like maybe Cobalt Skin from Army Painter or Kislev Flesh from Citadel will work quite well there. But genuinely, I don't think you're going to need to. With the dry brush over the top of the skin tone that we used to start with, when you drop the shade on it, I think you get a pretty quick and simple skin tone there. So I'm not going to worry about that, but just a note there if you do want to do it yourself. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and pop his base on him. I'm going to base him to match the rest of my platoon so far, and let's see what he looks like. And then with a little bit of sand and some static grass, our paratrooper is complete, and I'm pretty pleased with the result. I would suggest again, if you do want a slightly brighter red for the camo pattern, that red leather, gorgeous as it is, it will look terrible going on, but after a shade you'll have a winner. So again, quick shout out to Instar. These little pots of paint are brilliant. I haven't done a video on these guys yet because I don't really have enough colours to warrant it. Something I do want to correct. These are brilliant. All right, go check them out. And as well to Exit23 Games for the inclusion of the sound and lighting equipment. So hopefully something there was interesting to you guys. If you've got any questions as well, feel free, drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Facebook are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time. and you all enjoy the rest of your day.